What? Wait. Are you serious? You do realize I'm gonna have to redo the whole thing, right? That's 2 days worth of effort I have to now redo. No, I understand. Well, okay. No, that's fine. It'll just be, late, I guess. But this is not fair, and this is very shocking, and this is very surprising. To find out what I'm talking about, just watch till the end of this video. I'm not kidding. Hey guys, welcome to Digit.in, and today we're reviewing the Lenovo ThinkStation P620. Now this is, of course, some of you may be wondering, why would we talk about an enterprise machine in a consumer video? Well, I've actually been using this machine for a bunch of weeks now, and I have a feeling that some of you might actually benefit from the contents of this video. But before we dive into all of the details, make sure to hit the subscribe button on our channel, and of course hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any future updates from us. Now with that out of the way, let's begin. So first, before getting into anything of real importance, let's go over the specs of the machine that Lenovo sent over for review. At the heart of it is the Threadripper Pro 3945WX processor with 12 cores, 24 threads. Very critical component of this entire build, and in fact, basing all of our conversation this point forward will be based on the fact that this is a Pro series processor. Past that, you get 64 GB of DDR4 memory, ECC memory at that. That's pretty beneficial. For the GPU, you have the NVIDIA Quadro RTX 4000 with 8 GB of VRAM, and for storage you get 1 TB of Gen 4 PCIe NVMe, and you also have a 1 TB regular hard drive installed. All of this is cooled using a simple, very simple air cooling setup. There's one intake fan on the front blowing in cold air straight onto the GPU. The CPU is also air cooled using dual fans and a massive heatsink, and all of the hot air being generated within the system is exhausted out the back using the third fan placed on the back. Now, Lenovo tells us that this configuration is actually pretty decent and can run the system without letting it throttle. It meets the whole 280 watt TDP needs of the processor without any problems. But when I asked if what happens if one fan fails, any one fan in the system, they said, well, it's best to not run the system under load in those conditions and replace the fan immediately. Great thing is Lenovo's made this machine super easy to upgrade, super easy to swap out parts, and if you have any little bit of tech acumen, you should be able to do it yourself. In fact, fun fact, even the memory on here is air cooled. There are little fans cooling the memory as well. We'll show you that. So specs are out. Now let's talk about why would you want to consider an enterprise machine as your daily work machine. Now, remember how I said that the Threadripper Pro is at the heart of this entire conversation? And that's because with the Pro series of processors, AMD has really given you a lot of scalability, and of course with enterprise you also get stability. Scalability in the sense you have 128 PCIe Gen 4 lanes available to you, which is what allows you to add, let's say you could upgrade this to Quadro RTX 8000 series GPUs, 2 of them at the same time, or 4 RTX 4000 GPUs if you wanted at the same time, while also running your M.2 drives at Gen 4 speeds. So there is a lot of PCIe lanes just to ensure there are no bottlenecks anywhere within the system. With memory, you get support for up to 2 TB of ECC memory, and while large amounts of RAM is always welcome, maybe not for people like you and me who shoot 4K, but for architects or for people who are rendering massive timelines with a lot of VFX work, or for people who work with simulations, fluid dynamics especially being one of the most popular use cases. A lot of those projects get loaded into memory, and when they have to finally be rendered, a crash could occur in case there is a problem with the calculations happening in the RAM. So ECC sort of prevents that, giving you more stability, and having 2 TB of RAM is, well, never a bad thing now, is it? Like, who's going to say no to 2 TB of RAM? I'm not. So that's those are all the key features, let's say, of the Threadripper Pro. Now, if you could say that, why not save the money and go with the regular threadripper? Well, for one, far fewer PCIe Gen 4 lanes, support for only 128 gigs of RAM or 256. I'm gonna have to double check. We'll put it in the super. I'm just saying, but definitely not 2 terabytes, right? And when you have, and of course, you do get support for ECC memory. The CPU supports it, but you'll have to get a motherboard that also supports it as well, and that can actually be quite difficult to find because not all motherboards are available with ECC support. So going enterprise sort of gives you the peace of mind of not just future expandability, but also a very, very stable system running for longer periods of time, running heavy load simulations, models, etc., etc. Something that consumer PCs or DIY systems may not be able to stand up to. Okay, now let's get down to the real meat of this review, the performance of the P620. But in order to actually get a more holistic idea of the performance and the price parity of the P620, I also ran this whole suite of customized tests on 2 additional machines. The first one is a Ryzen build, which is powered by the AMD Ryzen 9 5950X and also has a Radeon 6800 XT on board. There's 32 GB of RAM in it, and the storage is a 1 terabyte PCIe Gen 4 drive. So that's system number 1. Costs close to 2.6 lakhs roughly. The price on this machine, the P620 on the box, is at 2,79,990. The Ryzen build is almost very close to this, 2.6 lakhs. And then the third machine that we have is my personal gaming machine, which is powered by the Intel Core i9 9900KS. The GPU is an RTX 3070 Founders Edition, 32 GB of DDR4 memory, 1 terabyte NVMe PCIe Gen 3 drive. Burps not included. And the cooling on both our DIY machines are all-in-one liquid coolers. So the Ryzen one is using a 240mm cooler, and my Intel machine is using a 280mm cooler. The cost of the Intel build is about 1.8 roughly. I mean, these are all rough estimates based on what pricing I could find online right now, to be very honest, for the components. It's not the official, but if you were to build something today, this is the ballpark you would look for. Now, I've got a lot of data. I'm just going to read this off of my notes because I don't want to get anything wrong. So for Premiere Pro, we have exporting a 4K H.264 file, exporting a 4K ProRes file, exporting a 4K RED project, and of course a file that is basically done solely using the GPUs. It's 4K as well. And in that, surprisingly, the ThinkStation comes out ahead of both the Ryzen 9 and the Intel machine. Do note that Intel and Ryzen machines are not server grade. They're not designed for creator workloads per se, but you know, just throw it in for good measure. In fact, the only area where the ThinkStation lags behind the Ryzen 9 variant is when working with RED 4K, and that could generally just be how either the GPU decodes the RED raw, or it could be simply be a factor of the fact that, you know, the Ryzen 9 CPU has 16 cores versus the 12 on the machine that we're working with. It could just be a factor of that. So interestingly, in Adobe Lightroom, it was the Ryzen 9 machine which was basically the fastest when it came to importing raw files. This is raw files from, there are 500 raw files from CR2, which is the Canon RAW, Nikon RAW, and then 500 from Sony RAW. So 3 sets of 500 files each. The Ryzen 9 was the fastest, with the Intel machine being the slowest. However, when it came to exporting these files, the ThinkStation P620 did come out ahead with the fastest render times across all 3 data sets, which is very interesting because exporting files in Lightroom is a purely CPU based process, and it's interesting to see that a 12 core chip was outperforming a 16 core one. So there's that. Then when it came to Photoshop, once again we see that the Threadripper Pro and the Ryzen 9 are fairly neck to neck in their performance, with the Intel part lagging behind. At this point, I mean, I'm just thinking, should I just replace my Intel rig with an AMD one? And like, can I take one of these home? I don't know. I'll have to figure that out. If you're moving into more professional workloads, which is 3D modeling, rendering, simulations, got some stuff for you as well. So we use the spec view perf standardized testing, which is the 2020 edition has come out, and it is actually more focused towards 3D workloads. So for 3ds Max, we see the Ryzen 9 like shoot way past ahead the Intel and surprisingly the Threadripper Pro part. The Threadripper Pro in fact has the lowest score across our testing for 3ds Max. So when it comes to SolidWorks, it does admirably well. When you look at Creo, the Threadripper Pro is ahead in every respect. So it's a very mixed bag. But here's the interesting thing. During this entire testing process, one of the most frustrating thing was dealing with crashes. There were, on the Ryzen build, twice spec view perf crashed on me. On the Intel build, my Premiere Pro testing crashed almost like 3 times on me. However, on the P620, there was 0 crashes. By 0, I mean like 0, like 0. Not just that, the machine was actually on for a period of almost 8 days at a stretch. Didn't lose power at home, lucky me. And despite all of that, everything happening back to back, and you know, as part of our testing process, I'm installing a lot of things, removing a lot of things, and it's like on purpose, I was not being very mindful of following a very clean, systematic process, right? The idea was to sort of abuse the machine as much as I could to see, was it really going to be that stable? And it really was. And I think that's what really is the point here. Yes, you have a CPU with a slightly lower clock speed compared to what AMD offers in its other lineups, but consider the stability that is coming from that 4 GHz base and 4.3 GHz boost. You know, that is very critical. Imagine rendering this, you know, if you're a wedding filmmaker, for example, you've got this 2-hour long timeline and you hit render and you have to deal with crashes every now and then. It's frustrating, right? This is the machine that sort of aims to eliminate that problem altogether, right there. Now let's consider the price, right? We've got 1.8 lakhs on the Intel build, 2.6 on Ryzen, and 2.8 roughly. I mean, as of recording this video, this product's not been launched. We've not been given the official pricing, but on the box it says 2,79,990. That's the label. Box is right there. It's like, yeah. So from that perspective, it actually does make a lot of sense for serious professionals, especially when we now are in this work from home space. If you've been part of a company that professionally does, you know, AutoCAD design, or if you do professionally handle rendering assets for a graphics studio, whatever, having a machine like this at home will save you a lot of headache that could generate, or rather come from, a DIY based machine. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is the future upgradeability. Now, I asked AMD during our briefing session about, you know, I was like, you're not gonna like dump this platform 2 years from now, leaving all of us stranded who buy this machine. So they said, well, AMD does have a good track record of supporting their sockets for as long as possible. And this is based on the 7nm process, this processor here. So the socket, I would assume, should support future technologies as well. Even if AMD moves into the 5nm space in the next few years, they would still figure out how to make sure that this sort of works. That's one. You should be able to put a newer processor in here if you chose to. The only downside that I do want to state is that right now Threadripper Pro is not an off-the-shelf part. That is a huge problem, because it's not just the processor, but it's also the WRX 80 chipset on which this motherboard is based. You cannot buy it anywhere off the shelf. It's just not available. It's an OEM only part, as it's called, which means Lenovo is the only brand that has access to it, and they will only give it to you as part of a pre-built system. This could come to other brands as well. I'm sure AMD will expand into partnerships with other brands, but bottom line is Threadripper Pro with the supporting motherboard comes only via a licensed OEM, which means that if you want an upgrade, you're going to have to figure out if the brand is going to support it. For example, if I took this back in and said, hey, give me the 64 core CPU, will they do it? I'm not sure. I'm yet to hear back from Lenovo if that's going to be a possibility. But processor aside, what you could do is upgrade your air cooler if you wanted to, replace the internal fans. You could upgrade your storage by yourself. You could add more memory into it. Now, the cool part is, in our briefing with Lenovo and AMD on this product, I will categorically ask them, is warranty still honored if a user upgrades these parts? And they said, yes, it is, which means you could pop this open and replace your 64 gigs with 128 gigs of RAM if you wanted, but it has to be ECC. Do remember that. No RGB for you guys, right? So there are reasons to consider it. I'll be very honest, I'm a DIY guy. I've been building PCs for many years, and you may have seen my face on a lot of these build videos that we've done at Digit. Some of you have met us at our tech day events with all of these custom PCs that we built in-house. I love DIY, and I love the idea of being able to take things apart and put them back together. I love the freedom of upgrading, which is one of the reasons I shy away from buying a laptop. And as an enterprise machine that offers you all of this is very reassuring. And it's the best part is Lenovo's designed this to be very friendly in terms of user upgradability, but what's also really nice is the way you take it apart. So there's a key at the back, so there's a housing for the key. So you take out the key from this housing, you put it in here, unlock it, that's it, push it inwards, and then out pops the handle. All you then have to do is just lift it up, the handle that is, and pull the case outwards, and there you go, revealing all of the glorious insides of the Lenovo ThinkStation P620. Let's take a closer look. So the insides of the ThinkStation P620 are actually pretty gorgeous. You'll see red accents everywhere, which is like a Lenovo signature thing. But let's just start off in this central section here where we have our GPU. This is the NVIDIA Quadro RTX 4000 plugged into one of the 6 PCIe slots. Now, of the 6 PCIe slots, 4 of them operate at X16 speeds, Gen 4, so that's pretty awesome. And then there are 2 X8 slots as well operating at Gen 4 speeds. So this is the card. It's actually, like, if you look at the GeForce cards, it's so thick and bulky, right? But this right here is super thin, and it's got a single blower in here over here. What's really interesting about this construction here is, of course, like I had mentioned earlier, all of it is user replaceable, so, and it's toolless. So you just release this bracket here. Now your GPU can actually come out, but in order to do that, there are screws over here that you'll need to remove. You can just use your fingers to do so. It's a metal bracket that actually screws into your GPU, preventing any kind of sag. So when I actually received this desktop and removed it from its packaging, there was no foam, no nothing on the inside. And typically that's how you would want to ship a PC, so that your GPU doesn't break off from the PCIe slot or the connectors don't bend. But because of this metal bracket, like, it's just doesn't move. It's pretty solid in there. So okay, that's with respect to your PCIe slots. Then additionally, you also get 6 SATA ports down here. One of them is used up by the hard drive that we've got. It's a 1 terabyte drive, and the other one is used up by the front bay, which is, you know, connecting to your ports and other such things, which also, by the way, includes a DVD drive. So that's right here. Now, if we come in a little closer, let me show you something cool. This right here is a fan for memory. Now, it may look intimidating at first, but all you do is you push on this red tab and this thing just comes right off. You do have to be a little careful because it's plugged into something on the motherboard. So I'm just going to quickly remove that. There we go. So it's a 4-pin PWM fan from Foxconn, 12 volt 0.49 amps. And this is actually what cools your RAM that's installed into this motherboard. Now, it's very interesting. If you look closely, there are 4 RAM slots here, only 2 of which are populated. And on top over here, we have 4 additional slots for a total of 8. Again, only 2 are populated here as well. this particular bay of RAMs, I would say, is also cool. It's got a fan of for itself. So I'm just going to put this back for now. So as I mentioned earlier, these 8 slots in total can accommodate up to 2 terabytes of DDR4 RAM running at 3200 megahertz, which is pretty cool. Now, we've gone over the RAM, we've gone over the GPU, and smack dab in the center is our AMD Ryzen Threadripper Pro 3945WX, the 12-core, 24-thread CPU. It's air-cooled, as you can see, using this very interesting design. So it's basically what's happening is there's cool air coming in from the front, and these fans pull that air inwards, exhausting them out the back. So of course, like, if you're a PC enthusiast, you could argue if this is ideally the best cooling design or not. But from our testing, what I've seen is even under load, we don't throttle, we don't hit the 90-degree T-junction. So that's pretty awesome. If this air cooling is working, I mean, why fix what isn't broken, right? So we've got that. So I did talk to you about the fact that all of these fans can be replaced by the user. That is true. It is pretty simple to do it. It's just that it's a tedious process. You do have to disconnect the GPU bracket from here, and then, you know, undo these levers, take the fan out, put in a new fan, and then close all of it back in. So the simple act of replacing a fan isn't about, you know, just removing 4 screws and then screwing 4 screws back in. It's also a lot of other stuff. Now, you guys may be wondering about the power supply. The power supply is actually very conveniently hidden away down here. Now, I could open this up and reveal the supply to you, but then I'd have to disconnect every cable in here, which, I mean, given how neatly everything is placed, I don't want to do that. So just take my word for it, the power supply is in here. It's a 1000 watt 80 plus platinum power supply. I mean, that's like really high-end stuff. Additionally, if you guys feel you're getting shortchanged on storage, besides, you know, having a terabyte of NVMe and 1 terabyte hard drive already in here, you could also add one more hard disk. And what's really cool is that the SATA connector is already in place. So SATA power is already here. You just need to route one cable from this red slot via this cable guard and then in here, and you're good to go. So that's pretty much all of the insides of the ThinkStation P60. What's really interesting is there is no onboard Wi-Fi. If you notice, there's no antenna in here, there is no connectors at the back, there's nothing, and that's perhaps because in an enterprise environment, Lenovo assumes that it's more common for desktops to be plugged in via Ethernet, and therefore there is no Wi-Fi. Plus, I think it would also pose a security risk. So yeah. Now, before I close this up, I really want to show you something really cool, and this is actually super helpful to anybody who gets this machine. If you flip this thing inside out, you have the entire layout of the motherboard over here with a detailed diagram rather, or, you know, a legend for anybody who's into maps for what's actually where. So everything is very clearly marked. So basically, you don't actually have to go online, look for a user manual, or you know, hunt around in the box for one, because there isn't one. This is actually all you need. So that's pretty cool. I actually found this really handy because it also explains what you know, which of the slots is X16, which is X8. It does so in a very neat and tidy fashion. So there you have it. Now I'm just going to close this back up. Which I'm going to show you is super easy. You just do that and close that up. And if you're in an enterprise situation, you would want to lock it. Now you can't move it, and then store the key in a safe space, which should not be at the back of the machine. Lenovo does give you 2 keys, which is really nice. In case you lose one, you'll always have a spare, but if you do decide to lose the other one as well, you'll have to reach out to Lenovo to sort of get a 3rd key. I would not recommend breaking this lock under any circumstances. The other takeaway of having used this machine for a period of about 3-4 weeks now is that this thing is deceptively silent. Now, my Intel rig, even if it's running on an AIO, it's got 3 intake fans in the front, two intake fans at the bottom to just throw air onto the GPU, and then one fan at the exhaust at the back. Every time I hit render in Premiere Pro, all of the fans start running. You hear it, like you can hear the fans. It's loud. Not uncomfortably loud, but it is loud. Even on a Ryzen 9 build, despite the fact that it doesn't have enough fans within the case itself, it would otherwise, if you were to cool it properly, it would be loud. This chassis here is very, very silent, and that's because Lenovo is using some very good quality fans in here, no doubt about it. And that is another reason to consider this. Third thing of convenience that I really liked was on the front panel itself, you got two USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports and two USB Type-C ports, high speed, which is super convenient. But also, you know, how a lot of these gaming motherboards have a diagnostic LED built into the motherboard, that's right here in the front. So when you boot the system up, you see this whole, you know, the codes scrolling through, so that in case there's ever a problem, you don't have to open the machine to figure out what the stop code was. It's right there on the front, and that's really nice. Third thing is, like, you'll see my Intel machine, that thing is huge. You'll see the Ryzen build, which is fairly compact, but also tends to have heating issues because, you know, it's so compact. This machine is compact, silent, and fits very well on most desks. You can just have it be in whichever orientation you want, standing tall, horizontal if you want it, should be just fine. Now, there is a utility on this machine that's actually very critical to delivering better performance. You guys know how gaming machines tend to come with this, you know, like MSI Dragon Center or equivalent to basically boost performance. Lenovo on this one has something called Lenovo Performance Tuner. What they do is they've basically taken the most popular content tools like 3D, photo, video, simulation, all of that, and created this utility. So if you have, let's say, Premiere installed, you fire up Lenovo Performance Tuner, hit Premiere, and then you can dedicate cores to it. You can either tune your performance to say, okay, Premiere is going to get 8 of the 12 cores dedicated, whereas the remaining 4 cores could be shared between Premiere and other processes that are running. So what happens is Premiere still gets access to all 12 cores, but on 8 of the cores, only Premiere runs. So Premiere dedicatedly gets access to that. And the other 4 cores are shared resources. You could also take a risk and say, you know what, dedicate all cores to the render activity, which could lead to instability, of course, because, you know, Windows needs some processing power. But here's the other thing. In case you are okay leaving a render running overnight, you want to reduce power consumption, you could also, through Performance Tuner, say, okay, use only 4 cores and leave the rest to everything else. So what ends up happening is that Premiere only will use 4 cores to render, and a project which would have typically only taken 30 minutes may take 4 hours, but overall the power usage could be less. I mean, we'll have to really measure that. I did not have an inline power meter to actually test it out, unfortunately. You could do it if you wanted to, but having that flexibility is important. You can set this up for every application you use, and here's what happens. You don't actually have to go into Performance Tuner every time. Once you've set your preference, the app you run takes precedence. Now, let's say if I've got Premiere Pro running and I've also got Photoshop running, I've told Performance Tuner that Premiere should get 8 cores, and that's my setting. But I've also set Photoshop to use 6 cores, right? Machine only has 12, but 8 plus 6 is equal to 14. So what it'll do is it will prioritize Premiere because that's the app that locked onto those resources first, and Photoshop will get deprioritized, automatically pooling it as a others program, and therefore Photoshop will only get to use whatever cores have been dedicated to other activities. So it's actually fairly intelligent and quite useful. If you put time and effort into it, you could actually squeeze out a lot more performance out of this machine. For all of our testing, we left Performance Tuner off just to sort of see how this machine would compare to our other 2 builds on a regular use case scenario. We will of course try and deliver more data points to you in the course of the next few weeks on our website. So again, for that, if you want more of that, do leave all of that in the comment section. Now, okay, I'm going to conclude this, okay, because I've been rambling for a while. Do I recommend that you content creators go out and pick up the P620, ditching your existing builds? No. Do I recommend that if you're building a gaming machine, you pick this up? Absolutely not. This is not for gaming. I did not even bother to run games on this, frankly. But if you are building a Ryzen 9 based machine, if you are considering a threadripper based machine, there are arguments to be made to consider a threadripper Pro instead because of its larger number of PCIe lanes. Again, like I said, support for far larger RAM capacities, a much more stable platform. And if you consider Lenovo's lineup of the P series of workstations, the P620 is actually quite lucratively priced as well.
3 days later.
What? Wait. Are you serious? You do realize I'm going to have to redo the whole thing, right? That's 2 days worth of effort I have to now redo. No, I understand. Well, okay. No, that's fine. It'll just be, late, I guess. But this is not fair, and this is very shocking, and this is very surprising. Okay, so I actually had to re-record the conclusion for our ThinkStation P620 review because when we actually recorded it, we did not have the official price, but we went by what was printed on the box. Turns out the box price is actually not the right price for the machine that we have. Lenovo sent us a higher spec machine than what the box price was quoted for. And the real price of this build that we've been talking about so far is actually 3.8 lakhs. That is a massive price difference between our DIY builds and the Workstation Pro, changing our conclusion altogether. In good conscience, there is no way for us to recommend this for an end consumer simply because the price difference is far too high and the performance delta is just not that big enough. Justifying this kind of price hike basis of stability and consistency in performance is also very difficult to sort of make and go over. You could build a machine yourself, and if you added that 1 lakh rupees to your DIY component list, you could actually get far better performance out of that machine than you would out of the ThinkStation P620 Pro. The P620 Pro finally is ideal, limited its uses to enterprise scenarios where big production houses, big architectural design firms need to give machines to their individual employees who may be working from home, so that when they have this, you have the secure platform of a workstation and you also get the reliability and the stability that comes with it. For the end consumer, unfortunately, the DIY route seems to still be the best way to go, and well, Intel and more importantly AMD do have you covered with performance in those respects. So that's wrapping up once again our review of the Lenovo ThinkStation P620 Pro. Definitely a great machine. I mean, I've enjoyed using it so far, but given the price point, it's just very hard to recommend to anybody who's just looking for a consumer grade device. Thank you guys for watching this video, and hopefully you would have subscribed to our page by now. But in case you haven't, do hit the subscribe button and of course hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any future updates from us. Thank you for watching, and I'm going to see you in the next one.